Well, come the tales of wild, west the morning her breath stopped. The world did not. The wind still bent the dying grass, and the prairie dogs still chattered like nothing had changed. But inside the shack, that brittle box of warped pine and peeling whitewash, something wholly had gone quiet. The girl sat on the floor, knees tucked up, her fingers clutching the hem of her mother's threadbare dress like they could still anchor her. Her little brother stood barefoot at the door, squinting into the glare, blinking more from the dust than the grief. His face was smudged, soft with sleep, and not yet understanding. "She's just sleeping weird," he mumbled. The girl said nothing. Her name was a secret now, folded up with her prayers. They wrapped the body in the only quilt they had, faded from a dozen suns, and stitched long before either of them was born. It smelled like firewood and dried lavender, all the things their mother had once been. They buried her just past the fence post, in soil too stubborn for digging. The girl used a soup spoon, her hands blistered red before midday. No hymns, no words, only silence. By sundown they were walking. The boy carried a tin can of beans and a pocket knife tied in an old sock. The girl carried everything else: a cracked comb, a Bible with water-stained pages, and the memory of their mama's last words. "If you find a man with eyes like still water, stay near him." They didn't know where they were going, just away. The wind pushed at their backs like a hand from heaven or somewhere lonelier. When they crossed into first field of winter rye, the boy stumbled. She knelt beside him, tucked the scarf higher on his chin, and said in that low voice she was learning to wear like armor, "We keep walking. We don't stop till someone says we can." At the edge of the next field stood a man. He hadn't moved since they first spotted him. Just a dark shape among the tall yellow stalks, backlit by the sky bleeding copper. He leaned on a shovel, motionless. Dust clung to the brim of his hat. His coat hung from his frame like he'd been wearing it since the war. They stopped a few paces from him. The boy coughed. The girl blinked up through dry lashes. The man looked at them, not like a stranger sizes you up, but like he was remembering something half forgotten. The girl spoke first. "Our mama died this morning." Her voice cracked, but she didn't let it fall apart. "We got nowhere to go, rancher." The silence after that was a canyon, deep, wide. The man looked toward the horizon, where his land met the ghost of mountains. Then he turned his eyes back to them, pale gray, soft around the edges like smoke, and said, low and sure, "Then you're already home." No other words. Just that. He turned and walked. Not back to the house, but toward the barn. Left the door open behind him like a trail of trust. The girl didn't move. Not right away. She stared at that open door as if it were a trap, or a prayer come too late. But the boy tugged at her sleeve. "I'm hungry," he whispered. And so they followed. Inside, the barn smelled of hay and dust and something older, like memories kept too long in one place. A single lantern glowed from a beam. A cot stood near the far wall, a folded blanket on top. Beside it, a pitcher of water and a chipped enamel cup. The man handed her the cup without a word. She made the boy drink first, then sipped herself. Her lips cracked. Her hands trembled. "You can stay in here tonight," he said, voice graveled by time. "House is too loud with strangers." There was no laughter in that, but no meanness either. He turned to leave, then paused. "Chickens need water in the morning. I'll show you how." And then he was gone. The girl sat on the cot, pulling her brother close. He curled into her side, already nodding off, warm from the water and the quiet. She stayed awake, watched the shadows shift, heard the barn creak like an old man stretching in his sleep. That night, she dreamed of her mother sitting in the wheat, hands muddy, eyes bright. She was planting something, not seeds, but buttons, tiny white buttons that grew into stars. When the girl woke, she wasn't crying. The next morning, the man came with a pail and a soft whistle. The chickens gathered at his feet like they'd known him in another life. He handed her the pail and pointed to the trough. She did as he showed her. The boy followed, his bare feet making little prints in the dust. Later, at the edge of the porch, he handed them each a plate. Eggs, bread, butter. the kind that came from cows and care. They ate in silence, not because they were afraid, but because it felt like church. When the girl looked up from her plate, she noticed something for the first time. Above the doorframe, carved deep into the beam, was a word, faded, almost worn away by sun and storms. Mercy. She didn't ask about it. Didn't have to. After breakfast, the man motioned to the field. Got fence post to mend. If you're staying, you're helping. The girl nodded. The boy grinned. By noon, her hands were bleeding again, but not from burying. This was a different kind of pain, a building kind. She caught him watching her once. The rancher, his eyes softened, then drifted back to the fence. When the sun began its slow retreat behind the hills and the chill crept in like a thief, she whispered to her brother, "We might stay a while." He looked up. "You think he's the one?" She didn't answer, just looked at the man's back as he hauled another post. And in that moment, as the wind sighed low across the prairie, she remembered something else Mama used to say. Sometimes the loneliest folks got the widest arms. And though she didn't know it yet, tomorrow she'd find a cradle hidden beneath the barn stairs, wrapped in old quilts and dust, carved by a hand that hadn't touched joy in years. The house stood like it had always stood, weather-beaten, square-shouldered, and settled into the land like a man who'd stopped running. It was the color of dry tobacco and dust, its windows small and thick with wavy glass. The girl noticed at first how there were no curtains, no flowers, no softness about it. But it didn't feel mean, just quiet. The man pushed open the door and stepped aside without a word. The children crossed the threshold like they were stepping into a stranger's dream. Inside, it smelled of old pine and ash, soap, and something like tobacco leaves left too long in a coat pocket. The floors creaked, but the walls didn't echo. Everything had been touched but not fussed over. Shelves full of tools and jars of nails, a kettle blackened from years of fire, a rocking chair carved smooth by weight and time. The boy shuffled forward, eyes wide, taking it all in. His hand brushed the edge of a table worn smooth, where someone had once etched initials too faint to read. A red blanket sat folded at the edge of a long bench. The girl noticed how it hadn't been touched in a while. Dust gathered only on things that hadn't been needed. "You'll sleep in the barn a while longer," the man said, voice low, like it didn't want to scare the walls. "I ain't got rooms ready." He handed them each a small tin bowl. Soup, beans, potato, fat back. Not hot, but still warm. The boy slurped it too fast. The girl ate slowly, watching him, watching the man, watching the way the light shifted through the slats in the shutter. "What's your name?" the boy asked between bites. The man paused, like he'd forgotten he had won. "Most call me Rig," he said, "but folks don't call much out here." The girl said nothing. She was learning that silence could be a question and an answer all at once. That night, the barn felt different. The wind still whispered through the cracks, but it didn't bite. The straw under the cot had been replaced. The pitcher refilled. A second blanket had been left folded near the boy's side. Little things. Quiet things. Someone had seen them and cared enough to do something about it. They slept without dreams. In the morning, he woke them with the sun. No shouting, no knocks. Just the sound of a pail thumping into the trough and a soft cluck of hens. The girl rose first, pulled on her boots with fingers still sore from walking. The boy grumbled but followed, his hair sticking up like a busted thistle. Rig didn't teach with words. He handed her the feed sack and nodded toward the coop. She scattered it awkwardly, the grain catching the wind. He handed the boy a bucket and gestured to the pump. The handle squeaked. Water came slow, like it didn't want to leave the earth. They worked through the morning, feeding, cleaning, fetching. Rig moved like someone used to being alone. He didn't correct, didn't scold, just kept working and expected them to follow. By noon, the girls' palms were red again, but this time from effort, not grief. They ate bread and boiled eggs on the porch. The sun climbed higher, smearing the sky with a pale gold haze. Rig handed them 2 tin cups of water and a chunk of cheese each. The boy asked if there were horses. 2, Rig said. Old, stubborn. Like me. The boy grinned. The girl, watching from the shade, noticed something else. A swing, nothing but rope and a board, hanging from a tree out back. The tree was large, full of green even in the dry, and its branches curved like arms mid-embrace. She said nothing but made note of it. It didn't look used. Not in years. That afternoon, she offered to mend the frayed hem of a curtain rig, had taken down from the pantry window. He didn't answer, just placed it on the table and walked away. She found a needle in the barn, thread in a tin, sat on the porch, sewing slow. The boy played in the dirt, drawing maps of nowhere. Supper was salt pork and turnip stew. Rig ate in silence, slow and steady. When the boy yawned, he nodded toward the barn. The girl lingered. Something wanted to be said, but didn't know how to shape itself into sound. Rig didn't look at her, just stared into the fire like it owed him something. My mama used to say men who kept quiet were the loudest inside, she said finally, voice barely above the hiss of the flames. Rig didn't move, didn't blink. She said it like it was a warning, but maybe it was a prayer. He looked up then, not startled, just tired. I ain't good at much, he said, but I don't leave folks in the cold. It wasn't an apology, but it felt like one. She nodded, stood, and left without another word. That night, a storm whispered its way down from the hills. Not a violent one, but restless. Thunder rumbled like old bones, and the wind tapped the shutters like fingers seeking entry. The boy curled beside her on the cot, and she pulled the blanket higher. In the loft above, where Rig kept sacks of grain and things he hadn't used in years, the girl found herself staring at a shape half covered beneath a tarp. She rose quietly, careful not to wake her brother, and climbed the ladder one rung at a time. Her breath caught. It was a cradle, handmade, the wood darkened with age, corners smooth from time. A quilt still lined the inside, blue, with tiny horses stitched in clumsy thread. A name had once been carved on the edge, weathered now, illegible. She didn't touch it, just looked, then climbed down again, heart suddenly too full. When she lay back on the cot, her brother murmured, "What did you see?" She paused. "A name someone didn't want to forget," she whispered. In the main house, behind a closed door, Rig sat by a window, holding a worn letter in hands that hadn't known peace in a long, long while. Spring didn't announce itself with flowers or fanfare. It crept into the ranch like a quiet guest, softening the earth one thaw at a time. The wind lost its bite. The chickens laid heavier. The morning stretched longer, soaked in gold. The girl began waking before Rig. She'd braid her hair in the cold mirror of the water trough, then feed the hens before the sun fully rose. Her movements grew smoother, her grip more certain. The boy, too, had taken a shadow in the old man like a calf sticks close to the herd. Rig never told him what to do. He just did things, and the boy copied, mimicked, absorbed, like rain through cracked soil. The girl planted seeds behind the house, rows of beans and carrots in a crooked garden framed by broken fence wood. She didn't ask permission, just cleared the weeds, loosened the soil, and worked until her back ached. Rig walked past her more than once, didn't say a word. But 2 mornings later, he left a tin pail of compost beside the rows. She took it as thanks. When they went to town, it was the first time the girl had worn shoes that didn't hurt. The boy's jacket had new buttons, unevenly stitched by Rig's hand. The general store stood leaning into the wind, like it had something to say, but couldn't remember the words. People stared. Not cruel, not kind, just curious, like trying to place a song half remembered. A woman with a parasol leaned into another and whispered, "Is that Rig wholesome with children?" Another woman behind the counter smiled thin as paper and said too loud, "Well, didn't think that man still had a heart beating." The girl felt it, a prickle under her skin, the kind of watching that made you smaller. Rig paid for flour and nails without a word. The boy asked if they could buy licorice. The old man gave him a quarter, silently. At the edge of town, as they were mounting the wagon, a man in a brown vest stepped close. A sheriff's badge flashed on his chest. "You doing charity these days, Holson?" he asked, voice dry. Rig met his eyes. "Not your concern, Marshal." "Just surprise is all," the man replied, hitching up his belt. Didn't think you'd look at another child after what happened to yours." The girl didn't understand, but the air changed. Riggs' jaw tightened. His eyes didn't blink. "We're done here," he said, climbing into the wagon. They rode back in silence, the wheels moaning over rocks. That night, the boy sat on the porch carving a stick into the shape of a horse. The girl placed her folded laundry by the barn door and joined him. The stars spilled over the sky like sugar, too many to name. "Why don't he smile?" the boy asked, squinting at the porch where Riggs sat alone, sharpening a blade slow and steady. "He's smiling," the girl whispered. "You just got to learn how to see it." She didn't say more, but she thought about the woman in town, the sheriff's words, the name etched into the cradle. Rigg had loved once. That much was clear. Loved hard enough to carve a cradle and sit in silence for years. People didn't go quiet for no reason. One morning, the boy found a baby goat tangled in wire by the north fence. Its leg was bloodied, eyes wild. He shouted for help, and the girl came running. She couldn't free it without cutting deeper. Rigg arrived a breath later, knife in hand. His hands worked fast, not rough, just exact. The goat jerked, but still once freed. Rigg picked it up like it weighed nothing, cradled in his arms, and carried it to the barn. They watched him tend for hours. The girl realized she'd never seen his hand shake until today. Not fear, not age. Something else. That night, she brought the bandages back from the house and placed them gently on the table beside him. "You ever lose someone you couldn't let go of?" she asked. Rigg didn't look at her, just reached for the linen, his fingers curling around it like a memory. "Every day," he said. Then he added softer, "But sometimes you lose twice. Once when they go, again when you don't let anyone else close." The girl didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. The next week, she found herself humming while sweeping the porch. It startled her, the sound, the ease of it. The boy started calling Rigg by name. No one corrected him. The garden sprouted, little green fingers pushing up to the dirt like they'd been waiting all winter to breathe. The girl smiled at them every morning like they were hers. Then came the envelope. It arrived in town, pressed into Rigg's hand by the postman with a knowing glance. Cream-colored, sealed, from the city. He didn't open it in front of them, didn't mention it, but the girl noticed how he held it, like it burned. That evening, as the sky pinked and the wind calmed, she found it open on the table. Legal writing, a name she didn't know, an uncle, apparently, a signature at the bottom. The boy was upstairs, asleep. Rigg stood at the sink, washing the same plate for too long. "You gonna send us away?" she asked. He didn't answer at first, just placed the plate on the rack and dried his hands slow. "I reckon that ain't for me to decide," he said. She stepped forward, looked him in the eye for the first time in days. "You took us in. I didn't plan to. Neither did Mama. But she didn't let us go once we came." He turned then, and for a moment, he looked like someone caught between two lifetimes. "I lost a boy," he said. The words cracked like dry timber. She didn't cry. She didn't ask how. She just nodded and whispered, "Then maybe you know better than most what happens when no one stays." Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the trees like someone remembering a name they hadn't spoken in years. The storm didn't come sudden. It rolled in slow, like an old man with a limp, dragging bruised cloud behind it. By dusk, the sky had gone the color of iron, and the wind carried the kind of hush that warned every living thing to hunker down and keep its head low. Rigg moved through the yard with quiet urgency, latching shutters, tying the barn doors tight, stacking wood near the porch like a man who'd learned long ago how fast comfort could vanish. The girl stood near the chicken coop, watching the branches twist in the wind like brittle arms. Her brother clung to her side, eyes wide, shoulders tense. "You've seen worse," she whispered, brushing hair from his face. He didn't nod, just watched the sky, waiting for it to fall. They barely made it inside before the first drop hit. Not a gentle patter, but a slap, heavy as coins on the roof. Thunder cracked sharp, a sound that echoed in the bones. Rigg lit the oil lamps and set one near the hearth, where the fire hissed and flared. The boy sat wrapped in a quilt, knees drawn to his chest. The girl moved slow, laying out blankets, double-checking the latch on the door, counting seconds between flashes and rumbles. Rig didn't speak until the second hour, when the wind began howling like a woman mourning. "Barn might flood if the river jumps," he said quietly. "I'll go," the girl offered, already standing. He shook his head. "You stay?" But when the boy rose too, trembling, she took his hand and followed Rig out into the dark. The rain felt alive, not just falling, but pressing down from all sides, blinding and choking. The lantern swayed in Rig's hand, its light a trembling halo barely cutting the dark. They reached the barn, boots slipping in mud, coats soaked through. Inside, the goats bleated, anxious, shifting in the straw. Water leaked through a split in the roof, pooling fast near the feed bins. Rig set the lantern down and began piling sacks to form a dam. The girl helped, shoulders burning. The boy grabbed an old shovel and tried to guide the runoff away from the pens. Lightning flashed close. The clap that followed shook the walls. Then the boy slipped. One moment he was standing. Then he was gone, vanished beneath the hayloft ladder, into a trench of rising water. The girl screamed. Rig dug before she could move, arms into the muck, searching blindly. A heartbeat. Another. Then he rose, boy in his arms, gasping and coughing but alive. The girl's knees gave out, and she dropped beside them, pressing her hand to her brother's chest, whispering over and over, You're okay. Rig didn't speak. He just knelt there, soaked and shivering. The boy pressed against him like something fragile he'd almost broken again. Back in the house, they dried the boy by the hearth, wrapped in quilts, fed him warm broth with shaking hands. He didn't speak for a long while, just sat blinking, as if trying to remember how to be safe. The girl sat across from Rig, her eyes not accusing, just tired. "You knew it could flood," she said softly. "I did," he replied. "You let us go out there. I wasn't going to leave the animals." She didn't argue, just stared into the fire. After the boy fell asleep, curled like a pup against the wall, Rig stood and walked to the mantel. He lifted a tin box, long, narrow, wrapped in cord, and brought it to the table. He didn't ask if she wanted to hear. He just opened it. Inside, a photo, black and white, curling at the edges. A woman, a child, Rig, younger, smiling, not broadly, but like he didn't yet know how heavy the world could become. "She died birthing him," he said, "and I raised him 6 years. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. Winter fever took him. I was out hunting when it started. Came back to find him burning up. Too far to town. Too late. I held him till he went still." The girl didn't move. "I carved a cradle for him. Then I buried it. Thought maybe if I put both in the ground, I'd stop hearing him cry." Silence filled the room like smoke. She looked at the photo, then at him. "You thought loving again would betray them," she said. He didn't answer. She reached out, gently closed the box. "I think not loving would have betrayed you." They didn't speak again that night, but something settled. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a bridge, quiet and unfinished, waiting to be walked. In the days that followed, the land dried, the goat survived, the barn held. The boy spoke again, voice hoarse but steady. Rig built a second row of fence, near the girl's garden. The beans had sprouted, fragile but determined. She knelt beside them each morning, brushing the dirt with careful fingers, whispering encouragement. The boy followed Rig now with more purpose, asking questions, testing tools in his palm. He carved another horse, smaller than the last, and left it on Rig's nightstand. No note, just wood and shape. One evening, as the sun dipped behind hills, Rig brought 2 mugs of cider out to the porch. He handed one to the girl, then sat beside her. They watched the sky turn to ash and honey. "You still think about that letter?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "You want us to leave?" He turned his head, slow. "I'm scared if you stay. I'll lose again," he said. She looked down at her mug, hands wrapped tight around the warmth. "We're scared if we leave, we'll disappear." The wind stirred. The garden rustled. I can't promise forever, he said. You don't have to, she replied. You just have to not disappear. He nodded once, but that night, as the lamp flickered low and the fire burned to ember, he unfolded the letter again, and in the candlelight, he began writing something new on the back. The morning the letter arrived, the girl knew before Rig opened it. She felt in the hush between wind gusts, in the way the birds stopped mid-song like they too were holding their breath. Rig stood at the gate, envelope in hand, eyes fixed on the ink like it might crawl off the page and name his fears out loud. He didn't bring it inside, just folded it once, placed it in his back pocket, and went to work like usual, hammering fence rails, feeding the hens, hauling water from the creek, even though the barrel was still half full. But silence wears different on a man who's begun to care. The girl watched his shoulders, how they hunched under a weight he hadn't carried in weeks. She didn't ask. She let him keep his quiet like a man clutches a fading photograph. With both hands, gently, by sundown, he hadn't said a word about it. It was the boy who broke it, standing by the fire with a mouth sticky from honey bread. Are we going somewhere? He asked. Rig looked up, startled. The girl held her breath. No, Rig said, but his voice cracked down the middle. The boy blinked. Then why'd you write a letter last night? Rig didn't answer, just stood slowly, walked outside, and didn't return for an hour. That night, sleep came in pieces. The girl lay on her side in the barn loft. Fingers curled beneath her cheek, eyes open to the slats of moonlight streaking through the roof. Below her, the boy tossed softly in his blankets. She could hear his breathing, even familiar tethering, but her mind wandered to Rig. He was alone in the house, probably staring at the fire again, maybe holding that old photograph. Or worse, the new letter, the one written in his hand. At first light, the sound of hooves stirred them. The boy peeked through the loft boards. His eyes went wide. Someone's here. A tall man stepped down from a sorrel horse, silver-trimmed boots scuffing the dirt. His vest was city-cut, stiff with pride, and a wide-brimmed hat shadowed sharp eyes. Behind him rode two others, thinner, colder, and in their hands papers, the kind that felt heavier than bullets. Rig stood waiting, arms crossed, like he'd already known this day would come. "Uncle," the girl whispered, her voice tasting the word like ash. She climbed down, spine straight. The boy followed, quieter now. The man tipped his hat to her, not kindly, not cruel, just like someone clocking property. "You two ready?" he asked. "I've arranged train fare east. Place with walls, school, decent future. Your mama would have wanted that." "She wanted us safe," the girl replied. "And seen." "You ain't got say in this," he muttered, eyes flicking to Rig. "Law says blood gets first right." "I'm standing for them," Rig said, voice steady. "You!" The man barked a laugh. A rancher who couldn't keep his own son alive? The air went still. The boy stepped closer to Rig, almost touching his leg. "You don't know him," the girl said. "You don't know what he's given." "I know what he's not," the man shot back. "Not family, not guardian, not kin." He pulled out the document like a sword. The sheriff, riding in slow behind, dismounted and took the page, reading it carefully. "Rig," the sheriff said, hesitant. "This here's legal. Unless you claim guardianship and they consent, you'll have to let him go." The girl stepped forward. "I consent," she said, her voice clear. The boy clutched her hand. "I do, too." The sheriff scratched his beard. "Well then, Mr. Holson, you got to say?" Rig looked down at them, at the girl's clenched jaw, the boy's trembling chin, then up at the hills where his wife had once laughed, where his son's cradle still slept under quilts in the loft. "I already said it," Rig murmured. "They're home." The uncle sneered. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this when they bleed you dry." "No," Rig said. "Regret comes when you let good things walk away because you're scared they'll hurt too much when they go." The sheriff handed the paper back, unread. "Looks like they stay." The uncle spat in the dirt and turned. The other men followed, silent. The horses kicked up dust but didn't linger. When the sound of hooves faded, the boy finally let go of Rig's coat. Are we really staying? Rig looked at him. You're already mine, he said. The girl smiled, soft and sure. They spent that afternoon tending to the garden, the girl planting late corn while the boy painted the porch rail white. Rig fetched nails in the shed and hung a horseshoe over the front door. When the sun began to dip, the boy came to him holding a scrap of wood. I made this, he said. Rig turned it over. A name card, rough but proud. Pa. The old man's throat bobbed. He didn't speak, just pulled the boy close and held him until the sun touched the hills and spilled gold across the earth. That night, the girl found the swing rope replaced. A new board, sanded smooth. No one said anything, but in the fading light, she sat down on it, toes just grazing the dust, and for the first time in too long, she let herself feel weightless. Inside the house by the hearth, Rig took down the photograph and placed it beside the new one they'd taken in town. All three of them, eyes bright, uncertain, and full of something dangerous and holy. Hope. Outside, the wind stirred the tall grass. And in the distance, past memory and regret, someone was finally calling him father again.